G'day, Ziggy D here. After its incredible performance on a 1 divine budget, I was initially planning on simply uncapping the budget and throwing all my divines at my charge stacking Arc Trickster. But I had a lot of requests to do it in tiers, stepping stones, so people could see how you might increase the budget in stages and what sort of power can be gained from doing so. As such, here's a look at the same build and character after moving from 1 divine budget to a 10 divine budget. Did I one-shot him? One shot. One shot. Yes. I did tickle him a little bit beforehand. So it's easy to just drop 10 divines on 1 or 2 overcosted items and get like a 30% power boost and call it a day. But I wanted to do way better than that and really get as much possible out of that 9 divine increase in budget. I am counting the initial divine budget in the 10 div total, by the way. I'm reselling some items and cutting that from the budget where I can though. Mostly all of the core uniques remain intact. I actually came out to only 8.8 divines in total spent, or 9.8 if we add the initial divine investment, so a little bit under the goal. Now when you initially set up a character for endgame, you pretty much want 2 things: to earn some money, and to level fast and get a ton of your passives. As such, my 1 divine version was built more for mapping and speed, but this character's long-term goals are bossing and tougher, less clear speed oriented content. All of that is to say that I always planned on dropping the Magi's move speed and Restless Ward, so we dropped a ton of movement speed in this process, and it does initially feel pretty bad as you adjust to the new normal. Minus 70% movement speed is a hard pill to swallow. If you wanted to keep a faster mapping playstyle, you could keep Restless Ward and aim to eventually get Mistwalker from the Shadow through Forbidden Flesh and Flames, along with an Orieth's End or another source of explosions for clear speed. But I want to focus on bossing with this character, so that's the route we're taking. So let's take a look at what we did with the extra 9 divines added to our budget. The first thing I got was a Dominus's Militant Faith Jewel for 1 divine. I opted for resistance to help with gearing, also why I got this item first, as you want to kind of get an idea of the picture you need to solve, the puzzle you need to solve in terms of resistance gearing. And I also grabbed a mana regen on it to smooth the mana out a little bit. This build only really runs out of mana if you put too many curse brands down. If you've been playing it and you notice that, just try to keep it to 1 brand, because those triggers really burn through mana. Of course, any reduced mana cost you can get does help. This jewel is primarily for the Inner Conviction Keystone though, as that is 30% more damage with no downside. Along with the 30% extra resistance and mana regen, that's a very good first divine spent. I also picked up Ancestral Vision Jewel for 45C so that we can work towards getting Elemental Ailment immunity as we build suppression. The next thing was the chest armor. There are a bunch of routes you can go with this, and long term you want to get more Fizz taken as elemental or chaos damage for mitigation, but I managed to pick up a very solid Evasion ES chest with Avoid Ailments and Stun, and a craft slot ready for suppression. Also, it already had the Flask charge roll, which is quite hard to land on the implicits, so that kind of made it feel like a really nice deal for 1 divine for the base. I ended up using the bench to 6 socket and 6 link it, so that cost another 1.3 divines. I got to resell my Restless Ward for 30 chaos, so got to swipe that off the budget. As I made these changes, we discovered that Energy Leech was a big gem for us, so I got a level 21 version of that for a nice damage boost. It was only 10C. With Arc, I also had 2 choices. Push for a level 21 Arc of Surging, or go for a 2020 Vile Arc of Surging to link Vile Arc. The 21 version is 5 to 6 divines, so that would eat way too much of our budget for the amount of power that it gives. It's a small increase. That's one of those small incremental things you can just dump a bunch of money on, only to see a tiny gain, right? It's effectively a budget trap, so I went for the 2020 Vile Arc of Surging for only 40 chaos, a way better investment, and gives us some nice clear speed improvement back as well, since that Vile Arc is now fully linked. As we planned on dropping Oath of the Magi, we now had more slots to fill with curses, so I got a second curse set up, a Hex Touch set up, and we now run Punishment, Enfeeble, and Temporal Chains as well. I also set up a Dark Marionette Aura setup to run Wrath. I have a video on that if you're not familiar with that setup. On the topic of curses, chat pointed out that Replica Dewedru's Damning Ring, it gives -1 max curse, but we don't care about that because we have 10 max curses. And it gives 15% curse effect, or up to, along with some much needed resistances. A good roll wasn't too expensive, and you can put caster catalysts on it to scale the curse effect, so I got that up to 15% for only 56 chaos all up. Pretty nice damage and survivability increase there. For the helmet, I bought an energy shield helmet with some resistances and fizz taken as fire for only 5 chaos. I bench crafted energy shield and used a sacred orb to fix its horrible base energy shield roll. If you don't know, items, armor, evasion, and energy shield has roll ranges, and sometimes they can roll really low, and there's a rare but not that expensive orb, the sacred orb, that you can use to randomize that figure. Particularly matters mostly for energy shield builds. That helmet plus the fizz taken as cold implicit that I crafted on it gave me a huge boost to survivability for less than 35 chaos. There's actually a huge potential market for fixing and crafting almost good energy shield helmets like this, by the way. I found so many different options and routes to go. And there's actually like a few different possible crafting scenarios in which you can make really good helmets for really cheap. So definitely something to look into if you're interested in crafting and a potential gap in the market. Next up, I picked up a That Which Was Taken jewel to get some more resistances to cap out and free up some suffix crafts. I also managed to get guaranteed chills, which is very nice, and exposure boosting for more damage, very solid for 1 divine. I of course grabbed a Taste of Hate for more physical mitigation, that was 100 chaos with a max roll. For the gloves, I grabbed a fractured pair of energy shield gloves and spammed less than 10 dance fossils, I think it was like 7 or 8, to get some acceptable energy shield and suffixes that I could work with, some dexterity that I needed. An empty suffix was desired so that I could put suppression on them. Capping suppression in a 10 div budget is a bit tricky on this setup, but possible. I'd be happy if we could just get very close and also get elemental element immunity or thereabouts. I didn't manage to get Unnerve on the glove implicits yet, and I didn't want to blow out the budget on implicits, so I settled on suppression and damage per frenzy instead. On the amulet, I anointed crystal skin for max resistances and near ailment immunity, 76 chaos for those oils. Awakened Unleash is too pricey for this budget, that's in the uncapped tier, so gem-wise I only grabbed an Awakened Added Lightning and an Awakened Hex Touch for our second curse setup, which is Hex Touch linked to Hydra Sphere for damage curses. Other than that, for 1 div I upgraded to a Fizz taken as Cold Malachite's Corruption, so that was a nice little increase there. Lastly, the charms for the Primalist Ascendancy, more resistance to make gearing better, curse effect is really good, suppression is a bit pricey so I could only really get it with a bit of crit multi in terms of relevant second stats, and finally you always want a source of Culling Strike in your builds, it's 10% damage boost. So I grabbed one of these with some bleed immunity. You could pair that with a Corrupting Blood immunity jewel as well to free up a flask suffix later. All up, the charms are a bit over a divine. So how did we do with all of these upgrades? Firstly, let's talk about the bad things. Aside from losing movement speed, I came in at only 93% suppression chance, not capped. Good enough for now, but this will be the first thing to fix when we uncap the budget. This gives 99% elemental ailment avoidance. So, not the numbers you want for hardcore, certainly good enough for softcore, not quite capped. Thankfully though, for a trickster, we can't really be frozen anyway because our action speed can't be lowered. So it's not really that real of an issue, and I haven't had any issues with it since then. It's in testing. Nonetheless, this is something that we'll cap as we cap that suppression in our uncapped budget. So now for the good stuff. I'm burying the lead here. Here's the side-by-side of 1 divine and 10 divine version stats. We tripled our hit damage from 420k to 1.2 million. I had hoped to double it, so this was a super good outcome. It's been fun one-shotting quite a lot of pinnacle content with this figure. Overall DPS is even more than that too, due to Culling Strike, since that's not represented in hit damage. And overall having a more stable character too allows you to do better in boss fights. Crit chance is capped with Flask, which is super nice. And they have solid uptime, especially when you only really need to hit like a boss once or twice anyway. That's within your Flask's duration. And we passive get Flask charges for if we need it later in the fight. But long term, I would love to cap without Flasks though, just for the smoothness of play. Effective hit pool also saw great gains, nearly doubling. But the important stat is that physical max hit more than actually doubling in total. Better suppression and better max hit taken means that one shot issue from the one divine version that I talked about is practically gone, and that lets our insane recovery actually do its job. As long as we don't get one tapped or insta killed by very rapid damage, then we have tons of recovery to heal back up. And that overall makes for a very tanky feeling character. I am obsessed with high recovery characters in this game, and I love like Trickster, Inquisitor, and Pathfinder for that reason. In a day of testing, I didn't really die in normal content, only like Maven memory games and Uber Boss learning, as I'm pretty terrible at those mechanics. On that note, this character can basically dumpster all normal Pinnacle boss content now. It was already doing pretty well on the one div, and now with triple damage, it's obviously doing very good, including things like insta-phasing Cyrus. It's probably ready for Uber bosses, to be honest. The damage seems to be there from my testing, just I'm not quite ready myself. I need a bunch more practice at those mechanics and things like ball management and shape of phase and stuff, and situational awareness. I need a bit more practice with that and confidence building. I have no doubt that a decently experienced player in Uber content could probably knock them over pretty easily with this setup. Overall, I'm very happy with the results. The build continues to exceed expectations, and I look forward to the uncapped budget version and simply deleting some Ubers. That's it for now. I'm Ziggy D, and thanks for watching. Fast empowered Hydra. I feel like I'm playing in fast forward. Me and the Hydra are both so fast. I feel like we're both like... so fast.